2 weeks ago, I made a list of the biggest bums, frauds, and losers in Percy Jackson. And y'all really showed out. But as always, the job is never finished, and you guys suggested even more characters who deserve to be on my list. And potentially another list. Hello, beautiful people. My name is TierlessMan39, and today we're going to go over 4 more of the biggest frauds in Percy Jackson. Starting off, we have someone who I'm sure you all know. An evil too great to even imagine. Someone responsible for economic turmoil the world over. Ladies and gentlemen, you know him. You hate him. Billionaire CEO Jeff Bezos. What's that?
Whisper, 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 whisper.
Wrong, Amazon. Shit! I knew this would happen. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the Amazons. Funnily enough, I'd rather work with the billionaire CEO before ever in my life joining up with the Percy Jackson Amazons. Before we start, I'd like to make a very brave and unpopular statement that will form the basis for this section. Slavery is bad. Thank you, you're far too kind. Yes, I know I'm a revolutionary. Yes, I know I'm basically the modern Frederick Douglass. But seriously, the fact that I have to even say that while talking about any group of supposedly good characters, or at least characters allied to the main cast, is absolutely insane. The Amazons, if you didn't know, are a group of strong, independent women warriors who take no disrespect. While they start off hostile towards the main cast, they eventually form an allyship that becomes a friendship. They're also literal slave owners. Yes, S-L-A-V-E, slave owners. Now, this might come as a teeny bit of a shock, but the Amazons don't like men very much. When we first get into their compound, we see a group of men in orange jumpsuits with steel collars around their necks being forced to work for the Amazons. Everyone is disgusted, but Talia, of course it's Talia, quells our heroes' fears by saying, "Don't worry guys, they're actually not slaves. They're just doing this of their own free will." Anyone who knows me by now knows my thoughts on Talia as a character, so I won't say much besides the fact that she's a failure, a bum, probably has fetal alcohol syndrome, and is not someone to be listened to. I mean, the evidence is right there. These men, to our knowledge, have no known rights, may hold no high position inside the Amazons, and from what we saw Kenzie do to Frank, it's perfectly fine to physically assault a man in their society for even speaking without permission. Sure sounds like free will to me, Talia. So it brings me no sadness to say that on top of being slave owners, the Amazons are frauds as well. Orion spent the entire last book giving the Amazons belt. He took out probably dozens of them in cold blood, and they were barely able to do anything about it despite claiming to be top tier warriors. And honestly, go Orion. Liberating people from slavery, fighting for freedom and justice for all, trying to end an authoritarian regime with his bare hands before tragically losing his life. Orion's basically just John Brown. Now, am I saying that the Amazons deserve to die and that Orion was totally justified in his actions? I'm not saying that. I'm also not saying that. Amazon fans got shooters out here. I gotta pick my words carefully. But suffice it to say, the Amazons are horrendous, and it is still insane to me that they ever were treated as legitimate allies by our main heroes. But speaking of misandrous girl groups that never do anything, let's talk about Artemis. Artemis is an incompetent cult leader, and her only skill worth mentioning is grooming teenagers. Damn, that's a crazy opener. Not wrong necessarily, but crazy. Even growing up as a kid, I never really liked the Hunters of Artemis. But I always thought that was just because of me being like 8 years old and being in my girls have cooties phase. That's still probably why I hated them, to be honest. But at least I'm retroactively justified now. Let's talk about A. Diddy and her band of merry women. At the end of the day, she actively spends her time looking for middle schoolers to sign their life away and join the Hunters, a permanent, lifelong commitment. Never grown women, never anyone who could reasonably consent and analyze the consequences, always little girls. She cuts them off from their support system, family, and friends to make them fight for her. I promise you, anyone with the processing power of a dim bulb would have Euro-stepped their way out of there pronto. You gotta admit, that looks shady as shit, bruh. Imagine if that were a god instead of a goddess doing this. Like imagine if Zeus, for example, was out here hunting for 12-year-olds. I mean, that would be... Oh. Well, if there's one thing I'll never doubt, it's Zeus's inability to keep it in his pants. I think that brings us to probably the worst moment Artemis has had in the books. Now, a lot of you might never have read Percy Jackson's Greek Gods, but there's a little story in there that exemplifies everything wrong with Artemis and how she runs the hunters. So Artemis was cool with this huntress named Callisto. Not just cool, actually. They were best friends, Bill and Ted type shit. But Zeus thought Callisto was kinda bad. So he decides to ask if she's trying to, get down to clown. And Callisto, being a huntress of Artemis, obviously says no. Duh. Unfortunately, to put it in ad-friendly terms, they do end up getting down to clown, even though Callisto's answer was still no. Next time I'm making a Zeus section. So obviously, Callisto decides to hide the pregnancy from the hunters because she doesn't want to be forced out and lose her literal only support system, since everyone she knows besides the hunters is probably dead and gone. And she probably doesn't want to tell her best friend Artemis that her father did what he did to her. But eventually, Artemis finds out and actually lets her retire from the hunters peacefully and confronts her dad. I'm just kidding. She actually turns Callisto into a bear, banishes her from the hunters, and tells her she has a kill on sight order. Brother, what? I might have to give Beryl Grace some slack. I see where Talia gets her fraudulence from now. Artemis genuinely moves like a 4chan incel more than a girl boss. You threatened to boom your friend, took away her support system, and worst of all, so much worse, you made her a furry! Like, at that point, just kill me. I'm just playing, y'all. I have been cured of any and all furry racism by my glorious goat, Sonic Fox. But seriously, that's genuinely so disgusting. I know basically all the Greek gods have their serious issues, but the difference with Artemis is she's held up, at least relatively, as one of the most benevolent deities in the series. And one of her big things is protecting women from the evils of men. I'd rather take color theory classes from Stevie Wonder than fall under Artemis's protection as a woman. Now, I've been going pretty hard on the ladies as of late, so I figured I have to shift my focus to the men for these last two. Coming up, we actually have Chiron of all people. Believe me, I'm as surprised as you are. I actually really messed with Chiron when I first read the series, but he was probably the most requested character we had after the last video. So I figured I'd do some research, and what I found shocked me. I'm sorry to say it, but Chiron is ass. Worse than that, he's secret ass. He manages somehow to fool everyone into thinking he's some wise and competent teacher, when in reality, he's Tony Snell. He might be the most fake useful mentor since Kakashi. 90% of this dude's screen time is just spouting mysterious lines and looking wise. He's basically a four-legged fortune cookie. Like, dude just sits on his ass and acts mysterious. He might have been more useful in the first half of Lightning Thief than he was for the rest of the series. I got Dom the Fawn over mid to late series Chiron. Whenever he has a chance to do anything useful, there's always an oath or a vow or a threat that means he gets a free pass to send 12-year-olds to die while he sits on his butt and plays bingo. Hey Chiron, why didn't you ever tell us about the camp of Roman demigods like 2 hours away? Because I made an oath, my child. Hey Chiron, why didn't you tell us about that world-changing prophecy earlier? Because I made an oath, my child. Hey Chiron, why'd you let that hellhound eat that kid during a training exercise? Because it was kind of fun. He who hungers for battle never ladles? What does that even mean? How do you spell ladles? Heh. When you reflect on these words, my actions shall become clear to you. Now I must, do mentory things. Yes! Secure the future of the camp and all that. Toodaloo! Poof. I'm still stuck on ladles. And look, I get that most of this is the fault of the Olympians, but it's been 3,000 years, and you've been sworn to secrecy for decades, if not centuries in most of these cases. In all that time, you couldn't figure out charades, my brother? On top of being useless, and despite his job being to mentor kids, he kind of just has zero empathy. Like when Percy woke up after almost being killed by the Minotaur, and to he and Chiron's knowledge, his mom just died. Percy, understandably, has a bit of trouble believing everything that just happened and is in denial. So Chiron says, and I quote, when Percy doubts the myths, "What if I told you, Percy Jackson, that some people will call you a myth to explain how little boys can get over losing their mothers?" I'm sorry, what, bro? Percy a better man than me, because personally, I'm pushing his wheelchair over for that. Would Mr. D smite me? Yeah, but that's so insane. All this, by the way, to make a point to a grieving 12-year-old. He also says after 10-year-old Nico disappears from camp that he hoped he got eaten by monsters because it was preferable to him joining the opposing army. Beyond his lack of empathy, his negligence shows in a billion other ways, like under-equipping quest-going campers, or that time he lied to a bunch of 11-year-olds and threw them into a battle he said was a field trip. But I think one of his dumbest moments was sanctioning the three-legged death race in Trials of Apollo. Now, demigods, of course, need to train in relatively dangerous circumstances to simulate what they'll face in the field. But that's like sparring or extreme capture the flag or whatever. This dude had these campers running a three-legged race in the labyrinth. Yes, the labyrinth. You know, the sentient, semi-carnivorous death maze that literally bleeds from the walls and actively tries to kill all who enter. The place described as one of the most evil inventions in all of creation. But guess what? It's fine now, because the labyrinth seems chill. That's the justification. Never mind that the camp is already low on numbers. Never mind that we've had multiple disappearances in like the past month. I'm sure none of that will be exacerbated by the race. After all, how could anyone disappear in the labyrinth? As you can probably imagine, the labyrinth was, in fact, still evil. You would think that being 3,000 would give you the foresight of a somewhat gifted 7-year-old, but apparently not. Chiron, I really did mess with you, but it's safe to say you're a lot more of a Dumbledore than a Sensei Wu. Before we get to the last entry on our list, I just wanted to ask that you please like, share, and subscribe. If you do, you're goated and sexy and your booty is fat. I also just started a community Discord, link in the description below. With that being said, let's get into our most infamous entry yet. Oh, Lukey Pookie. Where do I begin? What details should I hit you with first? I mean, I guess let's go with the fact that your goals made 0 sense. Which, hey, if he were perfectly morally consistent, he wouldn't be a villain. On the surface, I'm actually sympathetic to Luke's cause. You already know my thoughts on some of the gods, and the ones I haven't covered yet ain't too much better. Trying to overthrow the gods is actually a pretty valid goal. The problem is, why the heck would you throw your hat in with a dude known for eating babies? Like Luke, you are a grown-ass man, and despite your dyslexia, I do assume you can read at least a little. But for a pretty decent portion of time, Luke genuinely thought Kronos, of all people, was on his side. And some way, somehow, he gets surprised when Kronos of all people betrays him and stops being very nice. Aww. Breaking news. President of the Leopards Eating People's Faces Party decided to eat my face. Who could have seen this coming? There's also the fact that he's 23 years old trying to mess with a 16-year-old. This dude was so freaked that he used his literal dying moments with Annabeth to ask if she ever loved him. Yes, I know people have said that their relationship was a sibling one, and I'd agree. Luke just figured that this story was taking place in Alabama instead of New York. Heck, Annabeth had to be the one to clarify that she was never in love with Luke and that she only ever thought of him as a brother. If the question was whether she platonically loved him, newsflash, there'd be 0 reason for her to add that. And that's another thing, Luke can't even groom right. Like, it's not that hard for real in the Percy Jackson universe. Like, look at Anubis, or Artemis, or Calypso. Apparently, there's no such thing as demigod CPS. He really puts the L in L Diddy. This dude is so garbage that just killing him was enough to make you go to heaven instantly. Like, the world acknowledged he was such a loser that no matter who got rid of him, they would be absolved of all their sins in life. Luke, who's responsible for war crimes, mass homicide, etc., got to go to Elysium or Rebirth just for booming himself. I think that tells you everything you need to know about Buddy. Well, that's it for today's video. As always, I want to encourage you to like, share, and subscribe alongside checking out my socials in the description. If we get 500 likes on this, I'll make part 3. Let me know which characters you'd like to see featured. I love all you beautiful people, and I'll see you next time.